At its root, I really just think that biohacking is a curiosity to figure out what is right for your bio-individual body. So it's a process of curiosity and experimentation.
I get the privilege of interviewing the Biohacker Babes. Now, these two babes, and they are babes, are a unique duo of sisters focused on guiding you towards using data and technology to reconnect to your intuition and build an empowered and bio-individual health blueprint.
She would be in the bathroom like 15 to 20 times a day. And she created this life around that where she knew, where the public restrooms were. She knew she had to go from her house. She had this much time to get to the office. She had to stay at the office. She could never travel, go on vacation, because that would be way too much on her body. And through diet and lifestyle, we were able to rein that in. And after working together for 4 months, she then took her trip of a lifetime and she went to Ireland for 2 weeks.
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity podcast. My next interview is more like 2 interviews in one. I get the privilege of interviewing the Biohacker Babes. Now, these two babes, and they are babes, are a unique duo of sisters focused on guiding you towards using data and technology to reconnect to your intuition and build an empowered and bio-individual health blueprint. It's a lot of words. What I think it means is they create custom programs using data and technology so they know the exact way to coach you through your health journey. Lauren and Renee grew up with a father, Gene Sambataro, I think I got that right, an OG biohacker and pioneer in holistic dentistry. He taught them to understand their individuality, to be curious, and to be experimental from a very young age. Both Lauren and Renee have many accolades. There's a lot, like your web pages have a lot. Lauren, let's just be brief. We'll touch on a couple. Lauren is a former Broadway performer, a functional diagnostic nutritional practitioner, and maybe most interesting, a microdosing prep and integration coach. Renee was the moderator of a panel I was on at the Biohackers World event recently. She did an amazing job coordinating multiple experts, all with very different focuses. And I believe you guys both emceed the recent Hack Your Health conference. Is that right? Yeah, okay. Renee has a master's in holistic nutrition. She is a 21-day sugar detox coach and is a certified ketogenic living coach. One thing I have in common with both Renee and Lauren is we all love to dance. I think I got that from both of you. One thing I don't have in common with Renee is she is a black belt in ninjutsu. And with Lauren, I have only been in the audience on Broadway. Lauren and Renee, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for that introduction. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. That was great.
All right, I want to jump in kind of where you got started. First question is, what was the wackiest thing your dad suggested in the vein of biohacking kind of early on as you were growing up? And we'll start with Lauren.
Oh, why? Because I'm the firstborn? Here we go. Okay. Renee has the better memory, and she is the storyteller of the duo, but you called on me. So I don't know if I remember one particular thing. I just remember my dad was always like bringing home new technology. There was always some new device on our living room floor. Probably the one I can remember the best is like a PEMF mat, which just looked like a sleeping bag at the time. And as kids, we didn't know what anything was, and we certainly didn't have the respect and awe for it that we do today. But I think PEMF, which is so interesting because it's now really like coming into fashion, if that's a word in the health industry, but people are now just really getting the buzz around it. But my dad had PEMF in the late 80s, early 90s, and this idea that we can support the nervous system and really harness the healing frequencies of the earth, like in your living room, to combat all of the stressors that we incur over our lifetime through environmental stress, emotional stress, physical stress. Like, this is the tool. And he had one like way back when. And if I could only go back and really be an expert in PEMF from that day, I was less than 10. I've always known about it and always appreciated it, but it's just so interesting. My dad was like truly a pioneer in so many ways.
He was doing PEMF when PEMF wasn't cool. Like
Pretty much. Just like people weren't talking
Yeah.
about it at all. Yeah.
It's interesting because at the recent biohacking conference, there was a Pulse booth at the end, and we were having a conversation with a guy who is clearly extremely knowledgeable, kind of quiet, and really doesn't get out. So it took us a while to warm him up. And one of the things he said about these Pulse PEMF chairs, benches really, was that you can get the benefits of a chiropractic adjustment from being on this PMF table, which for me was two things, because chiropractic sits in a space that I don't exactly understand, right? Like, I think there's value there. I'm in fact seeing it. I visited my chiropractor this morning. But it's nice to have the confirmation, yeah, there is value, and not only is there value, you can get it from those PEMF devices over there. So yeah, that's very cool. Anything more specific, Renee? Or different that you remember?
I think just to add to that, Lauren and I grew up dancing. We did ballet, so we had our fair share of injuries as kids. And I remember my dad giving me this like handheld red light device. And he was like, just shine this on your back and shine this on your knee. And I'm like, can't I just take an Advil for my pain? You know, like, why am I putting a light on my body? This seems so crazy. But now here we are almost 30 years later. It's like, well, of course you're going to put red light on your aches and pains. So, yeah.
And none of my other dancers in my group are putting red lights on this. Like, why are we the only ones? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, did your mom have an impact on your biohacking? And I have to ask, how did she handle your dad's stuff? Because, I know even as I moved into the health space, I got some eye rolling from my own wife. How did your mom handle it? And what was her impact on biohacking, Renee?
Yeah, so she did play a role. So our dad is a biological dentist and our mom is a holistic dental hygienist, and they have been in practice together for 40 years. So she's been very aware of the holistic health oral systemic connection for a very long time. She never really bought into as many gadgets and devices as our dad did. So we kind of joke when we go to a conference, my dad's allowed to buy one new toy. And so my mom is there with the credit card, like, okay, pick one, because he would just buy everything possible. And our mom is kind of like a unique one in that she sleeps great, she works out, she's super healthy, and she doesn't really do much to biohack it. Like, she wakes up with these perfect Oura Ring scores, and we're like, how did you do that? She's like, I just put my head on the pillow and here I am, versus like Lauren and I and our dad were like, how many gadgets can we use before bed to optimize our sleep tonight and try to get as good of a score as our mom? So it's been cool to watch both of their journeys. Yeah.
A holistic, I've got a friend who's a holistic, and I actually didn't really understand what holistic dentist was until I interviewed Dr. Dom. I'm sure you guys have seen him, right? Friends with Chris Gethin that you just met. I think close friends. Were you guys off of fluoride containing toothpaste early on, Lauren?
I'm pretty sure. I think Renee would probably know, but I don't think that was ever an allowable ingredient in our house. Like, we were allowed to eat
really little. We had
probably really little, but we were probably still eating like Gushers and fruit snacks after the fluoride was taken away. I'm pretty sure that was like on the off limits list pretty early on. Yeah.
The mintiness and the sugar, it's an explosion in your mouth. It's so amazing.
Yeah.
Because when I had a friend of mine tell me that you need to be off of fluoride toothpaste, for me, it was kind of this, shake the earth moment, because the one thing that I was, not the one, right, but one of the things I was absolutely clear about, right, because it's been marketed so well, is that fluoride was good for you. And I told her, she's actually out of Dallas, I told her, Crystal, like, if this is true, I have to question everything. And now, like, we're in the biohacking space, and we do, in fact, question everything. So it turns out to be a true statement. But it was one of those things, at least for me, that was very, very shocking.
Yeah.
All right, you guys were MCs at the Hack Your Health event recently. How did that go? Was there anything really memorable that either of you would like to share or would share?
One, it was super awesome because it's our favorite thing to just be in community with like-minded individuals, and the best part about all of these conferences is just running into people and having these unplanned conversations. Like, you don't really know what the day holds for you, but you're in a space, in a container where like so much magic can happen. And so just being in the flow and meeting people and having conversation is always the biggest takeaway. But we got to MC, so it was very cool to be on the back side of the stage to really have these like off the record conversations with the speakers that we were introducing. It was an interesting crowd because the event used to be a keto carnivore community, and they're starting to transition to a broader spectrum of health optimization and biohacking. So they brought in a lot more biohackers this year, which the community wasn't super familiar with, which was kind of interesting because that's those are our people. But I think it's really awesome what they're doing. They're really trying to meld all of these worlds. And I think that's so crucial in the health industry because we do end up having all these little silos, and like we have our communities we all know each other, we all have each other on each other's podcasts, but we're not spreading across to like different thoughts and perspectives and communities and people and experiences. And so that was a really awesome thing to watch, like different communities be like, oh, what are you doing over there? Oh, what are you doing over there? And we're just going to start talking. And that's where I think a lot of the magic happens. So, and we were in Austin.
Renee,
so it's cool.
Yeah, Austin, keep it weird. Austin's a great city. Renee, anything stand out for you? And I have to ask, like, how many podcasts did you get booked? Like, you're probably like, hey, we need to have on the podcast. Like, let's get that scheduled.
Handful.
Yeah, a handful. Yeah, I think similar to what Lauren said, it was really interesting to see such a different community. And I'm excited for them to be bridged together. You know, for example, we introduced this keto carnivore panel, and like people were on their feet and cheering and applauding, so excited. And then we brought out like the biohacker panel, and it was like, not quite the same vibe where we're like, you know, these are huge people. We would love to have all of them on our podcast if we can get them. But I'm excited for next year. They're going to do it in Tampa, Florida, September 2025. I'm like, it's already on my calendar. I think it's going to be a great event. Robin, who hosts it, she's amazing. I think it's just going to keep getting better and better.
In one of your interviews, you mentioned that you guys started your podcast, Biohacker Babes, because there was a lack of a female voice in the space. And I was wondering, have there been a moment where you're digging into biohacking and things are being suggested and they just don't work out with you, maybe because of your physiology as women? Or was it just that the biohacking community was missing and a voice you felt it was missing the voice that resonated with women? And at this point, you guys are really good at handing off things. So let me not call, like, you guys figure out who to answer, because I think you've got this down.
Yeah, I think there's so much to dig into there. One is females, because a lot of our complaints are around energy and hormones and menstrual cycles. So whether it was working for us or not, it just didn't feel right or supported to have a man talking about this stuff. But there's just so much in biohacking, and it is so highly bio-individual, and we've had a lot of amazing pioneers, and they happen to be men. But as we really get into the nuances of this, sometimes we can get really kind of obsessed with particular modalities or tech or wearables. But I think like something that's been largely missed from the beginning is like teaching us how to be biohackers. And that's really what we wanted to bring to our audience is teach them how to set up these experiments, how to listen to your body, rather than just telling people, oh, you should try this, you should try that. There's a million things to try. There's like never a short list of things to buy and try and adopt into your life. But like, how are we actually learning and listening to our bodies to figure out if they're working for us, so then we know long term what we should really be experimenting with. So I think it's really like the how and the why that we're trying to address that we felt like was missing. But we're so grateful to the men that really paved the way and created this space and created the roadmap to even have these conversations.
I can share like the first, and this is so unconscious, right? The first version of my webpage for my podcast, Live Beyond the Norms. It was mostly men, and some of that was because the big ones were Gundry, Asprey, Greenfield, right? So you start off with 3, and at first I think I only had 4 people, and it was actually a guy, like pointed out, hey, this is very male focused. Like, oh my God, I have so many amazing women, I need to get them up there as well. And so now it has a lot more balance. Sometimes it is that you just need to hear that other voice. Renee, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I had a personal experience where whether it was biohacking, health optimization, whatever you want to call it, I was introduced to Dave Asprey's work and I was like, oh, this makes sense. I'm doing the butter coffee and the 16-8 fast and CrossFit 5 days a week. And I felt like crap. And I'm like, but Dave Asprey's doing it. Ben Greenfield's doing it. Why can't I do it? And then I got introduced to the idea of cycle syncing. And I'm like, oh, we can't biohack the same as men all month long. And when I leaned into that, the magic happened. I was like, I can fast sometimes, but other days I can't fast. And I wasn't really hearing anyone talk about that. And I thought that was really fascinating. And like Lauren said, a lot of women, especially in our reproductive years, they are struggling with so many health issues that we could avoid if we just leaned into biohacking for women.
You mentioned Dave, and I think something that's really interesting, I saw him on a Mind Valley interview and he showed his six-pack abs. Great, like that's nice. But then says he got them at like 15 minutes a week. You guys were or are dancers, like that's hard training. I played soccer, that's hard training. I don't know that I would be satisfied with just 15 minutes of any kind of training a week. What do you guys think?
Ooh, yeah, that's tough because there's so many cool biohacking fitness modalities like the ARX, which is AI technology for strength resistance training. There's the Carol bike, which is AI for HIIT training and cardio. But I think if you look at the way that our ancestors moved, and we should always be modeling our lives a little bit more after what our ancestors did because they had less stress, they were more aligned with nature. I mean, they were doing some really hard stuff for extended periods of time. So I like the idea of harnessing this technology for minimum effective dose. And really the benefit there is like reducing the strain on your body, but also like freeing up time. Like that's so valuable. We could all use more time in our days. But we still have to remember, like, we can't cut corners. So we do have to do the longer, the harder stuff. And I think we have to change it up, too. Like, you shouldn't be doing the same thing all the time. So if that 15-minute workout's working for you for a phase in your life, at some point, it's not going to work because the body is an adaptation machine. It's always going to adapt, and then it's going to need new stimulus. So even if it does work, yes, it can. We still have to change it up. And I think we're also just designed for harder, longer stuff sometimes.
Anything to add, Renee?
I think it's so individualized, right? With any kind of exercise. Like if you hate lifting weights and you're not going to go to the gym, you're not going to do it, then please find an ARX or an OsteoStrong or whatever technology to get that hormetic stress. But if going to the gym is your therapy and you love it, then keep doing that. Don't feel like, oh, I got to do the 15-minute cheat machine. And then the variety is just so important. I mean, I'm always mixing up what I'm doing. And I don't have access to an ARX or a Carol bike yet. Hopefully that'll change one day. But yeah, fingers crossed.
And I think, Dave tends to shock, right? So that's certainly some of what he's saying. And if you think about the four modalities of movement exercise that we really need to be doing, right? VO2 max, actual resistance training, balance training, and flexibility training, that's just not happening in 15 minutes. Anyway, I think it's a Dave, like, let me shock people into like rethinking things. And there's certainly value in that. And Lauren, you just mentioned kind of tap into ancestral. You guys talk about ancestral hacking. Talk about what ancestral hacking means to you.
Ooh, okay. So if we think about the way that our ancestors lived, I mentioned like they're more aligned with nature, the rhythms of the sun cycles. They were grounded because they were living in dirt with lots of good bugs. And our modern day lives, I think we've really accelerated aging because we have a lot of stress from the environment, from chemicals, from emotional stress, not handling our nervous system regulation. And so this process of aging really is like, can we slow down these stressful inputs and slow down the inflammatory load and slow down the oxidation that's happening? Because our ancestors weren't up against that. And so, yes, they had their own issues, like hygiene was a huge problem. And so they had, they were taken down by like hard and fast diseases. But I think our stress is really what's killing us these days. So if we can start to lean back into the rhythms of nature and be outside more and be in the sunshine, which a lot of people are afraid of. We've been taught that the sun is harmful. And eat less processed foods. I don't think any of this is a surprise to people that are listening, but I'm always just like, okay, wait, how did our ancestors do it? Can I like just lean back in that direction? Can I simplify a little bit more, because modern day life has really put a lot of stress and toxic burden on our bodies. So it's just like slowly kind of peeling that back and trying to lean in the past is how I look at it.
I think when I interviewed, I think it was Natalie Nadam, we started kind of batting back and forth this concept of, is biohacking necessary for longevity? And kind of the conclusion was, if you're in a pretty rural place, right, and you take off your shoes, you do a couple of little things, which, maybe we could call natural as opposed to biohacking. Maybe you don't need biohacking. But if you live in an urban area, like, you're just inundated with stress, the stress of driving, the stress of noise, the stress of pollution, like just, the stress of getting seated at a dinner table, whatever it is, you have to be doing biohacking if you're living in an urban area.
Yeah. I would just add, like, it kind of depends what your definition of biohacking is. Like, the tech is such a huge piece of it, but at its root, I really just think that biohacking is a curiosity to figure out what is right for your bio-individual body. So it's a process of curiosity and experimentation. So it doesn't have to be technology. We could still be living in an ancestral life, but we could be biohacking because maybe I need slightly more protein and fiber than my sister, who I'm quite genetically similar to, or I need to do a slightly different ratio of strength training to endurance training. I mean, there's like these little nuances where it's just playing with our biology to see what actually is going to create the most optimal expression of our genes.
That goes back to the curiosity that your dad instilled. I've been thinking in terms of like ancestral. People talk about the paleo diet, and one of my concerns is older man was not really supposed to live past 35. Right? Like, so is it actually wise to choose his diet? Because if his diet killed him at 40, it didn't really matter because he was already dead because he got eaten by a lion or fell off a cliff or, had a disease like you mentioned. Have you guys kind of thought about that in that context, Renee?
Yes, I'm so glad you brought this up because we talked about this a lot over the weekend. So there's a new documentary coming out, Food Lies, by Brian Sanders. And he showed some really interesting research about how a lot of us talk about this, like, well, if they were dying at 35, 40, then why are we looking at what they ate? But actually, they're saying that was the average age that people died, but that was only because there were so many infant mortalities. So if he actually showed the average, and he's like, if you look at how many deaths there were before the age of 7, if you actually made it past that age, people were living into their 70s and sometimes 80s. But what is the average of that? 35. But actually, it was just because the infant mortality rate was so high. And now we don't have that, right, because of all the sanitization and all the things going on. But so they were actually saying that what they were eating was helping them live to 70 and 80, and they weren't having all the chronic diseases that we have today. But their paleo diet, he was also pointing out, is different than our paleo diet today. Like, the tubers and fibrous plants and things they were eating are not the modified broccoli and cauliflower and even the things that we think of as natural. So the paleo diet today is definitely different, but I think we can still learn a lot. And I think it's going to be a really exciting documentary. And he also says that humans evolved because they ate meat. So the importance of meat in your diet was really interesting, and how the brain grew and humans evolved. So some interesting stuff there.
Yeah, and I think it just brings up, hey, you understand what they ate, but take it with a grain of salt. And you're right. As you think about expected lifespan extending, increasing over time, a lot of that has to do with infant mortality, like solving infant mortality, and so that makes perfect sense. So yeah, maybe it is the perfect diet. Like maybe it's not that we live to 35. I like that. I hadn't thought about that. I wonder like what that diet looked like from the perspective of, I recently started eating a lot more protein. And when I say a lot more protein, it's like I'll walk into my office and I'll tell my office mate, I'm like full of protein and I need to eat a lot more protein in like 1 hour. Like I'm just full. And I have put on quite a bit of muscle mass in the last 3 months with basically no change in my workout. In fact, it was the added muscle mass. Now I'm increasing the weights. It was not, I increase weights, and right. So I think it's really important to do that. because you have to be combating sarcopenia, right? Muscle wasting as you age. And so it'd be interesting, like, were adjustments made, for our ancestors? Like, they certainly didn't have the data that we had. They didn't listen to a Peter Attia interview and go, oh, I need to be eating a lot more protein. Ironically, I actually got the protein diet from Alex Hormozi. I don't know if you guys follow Alex Hormozi. He's a big, he created Gym Launch, sold it for $42 million. He basically advertised, I've had a six-pack for 20 years, and I built and sold a business for $42 million. I'm like, busy man with a six-pack. What is he doing? Because that's the kind of thing I want to do. And then I actually saw a Peter Attia video that mirrored it, which is like 1 gram of protein per pound of body mass. I'm 170. That's like 2 pounds of meat a day. I'm only getting like 1.2, and that was a significant increase from where I was, and it's made a big difference. But
could I just add in really quick about like increasing protein?
please, yes.
I don't know if this is actually the difference, but as we get older, at least in our modern day lives, with the accumulation of stress and inflammation, we are really depleting our digestive enzymes, so it gets harder to break down food. We have more assaults to our microbiome, so there's more leaky gut, so our nutrient absorption goes down. So I think we actually have to increase protein because all of these processes of absorbing protein are becoming less and less. So that's why we talk about when you get older, it's like you have to do like all the bioavailable protein possible because you have to try harder. But is that our modern day world? Question mark? I'm not quite sure.
And it may still be. What was presented in that Peter Attia video was that we are really good, right? So our muscle cells are replenished every 90 days, right? And we are really good up until our 30s at taking those cells that we break down and using those amino acids to rebuild another muscle cell. But around 30, we get significantly less efficient at doing that. And similar to like NAD, we're less efficient at taking old NAD and processing it into new NAD. At least that's what Dr. Conlon says. Her product is Nuchita, I think Nuchita. I got a chance to interview her over the weekend, and she was on my summit. But our body's ability to process old material gets diminished, and that can be, which sounds like a death sentence, right? Which is sarcopenia, frankly, is a death sentence if you're continually muscle wasting. But if you can overcome the fact that we can't reprocess the existing muscle cells by eating more protein, and that's what the data suggests, is that we can't, like, eat more protein and you can maintain and even grow muscle mass. So really exciting stuff. You guys have interviewed lots of people. I think it's 248 episodes. It turns out I've interviewed some of the same people for my longevity summit. Dr. Tom O'Brien, awesome. Kristen Wetzel and Natalie Needham. I just started your sleep one that you did at an event recently. So Lauren, what is an interview that is kind of off the beaten path that surprised you and you're really glad that you got to do?
Oh gosh, there's so many, but perhaps I've done a bunch of psychedelic podcast interviews, which I love that opportunity because the audience is waiting to hear more just about psychedelics, but I love to zoom out and talk about all the foundational things that support our mental health and nervous system. So that's always a really awesome just opportunity to talk about, like, there's not just one way to support our mental health. And if we're not doing the foundations, the basics, like, we're not going to get so far with plant medicine. Plant medicine is amazing. And especially macro journeys can be a huge step forward if we do the proper preparation and integration. But for most people, we have to be doing the lifestyle stuff, that what we talk about in biohacking and all the ancestral hacking, which is optimizing our circadian rhythm, optimizing our sleep and our stress regulation, and being really careful about what we put in our mouths because food is information for our cells. So yeah, I think just like as a general answer, I love to go on those and like talk to a totally different audience that's not quite expecting it. Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. Renee?
I can't believe I'm about to say this, but the plant medicine episodes that we've done, that's what came to my mind when I heard that question. We've had a lot of interesting guests with different perspectives on plant medicine, and I have learned something from every episode that like really, really resonated with me. And I think the big through line was that all these biohacks and things that we're doing are amazing, right? But sometimes we just have to slow down and learn how to be still. And I've always been like the type A biohacker, like how many biohacks can I do in a day? But through plant medicine, I have learned sometimes it's just doing nothing or doing less, and then using that as well to tap into your intuition to say, what is working for my body? What isn't working for my body? And I think sometimes we mentally override that and say, oh no, it's the cold plunge. That's definitely what I need. And it's like, but if you slow down, what is your body really trying to tell you right now? And for me, it's always do less, which has been a hard lesson, but it's just interesting that all of our plant medicine guests have had that through line.
That's pretty cool. I assume you were on the plant medicine when you did those shows.
We were not in this plane of existence. We went somewhere else.
Yeah. We listened to it later.
Really, when
we're like,
we watched,
oh man, I don't remember that. No.
yeah, exactly. When we watched the video, like really, it was just a bunch of mumbling.
We were actually just talking through telekinesis. We weren't speaking at all.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
You guys talk about using bio-individuality to reduce overwhelm and create action. I have to imagine that this is either from the experience of you feeling overwhelmed, right? Or working with customers who you kind of come to understand that they're overwhelmed. Can you give us some examples of this overwhelm and where it sits in either your own experience or some of the experiences of your customers?
Yeah, I really think we're at a peak time where people are just, they're hearing, their ears, their minds are so saturated with all of the thought leaders and the perspectives and the protocols that have worked for that individual that created them, right? And so there's a lot of dazzling ideas and protocols that are interesting to people, but we like to really just simplify. And one, what Renee said, is teach people how to be still so they can start getting intelligence from their own body to know if it's right for them, because Renee and I are the same. Like, I would love to do all the biohacks all day long because I think that they're fun, but it's just not life. Like, we're not living life if we're just stuck to this to-do list. So I guess an example of kind of paring down and getting bio-individual is using some kind of wearable, I would say, to start. And that could just be like a subjective tracking in a journal where you're like writing down how you feel. That's a tough one for a lot of people. Or using objective data through something like the Oura Ring, which measures your sleep and your activity. Or I love a continuous glucose monitor because I feel like that's such a wide perspective on how you're sleeping, how you're eating, how you're managing your stress, how your exercise is affecting you, your mindset. When we start talking about like how are you absorbing this data, you really get to see like the narratives that are going on in people's brains. And also from an accountability standpoint, then we actually get consistency through accountability to see is something actually working, because that's a big problem. People don't try things consistently enough and long enough to even know if they're working. So we really have to build in this process of how can we develop a very simple experiment like we learned in 6th grade science and carry it through to the end, and then make sure that we're slowing down and listening to our body. And then like your body decides if it's right for you. And then you have less things on the to-do list because you're very clear on, I felt this worked, this moved the needle, I enjoy doing this is sustainable for me, like end of story. So the wearables are just kind of one way to drop in there. There's a lot of ways, like through lab testing, or again, like I think the journaling is so powerful for everyone because we don't spend enough time with self. But I'm sure Renee could add to that list.
Well, before we switch over to Renee, you guys interviewed Jean Falacata, and one of the things that he talks about, right, he's kind of moving in the direction of life spanning. And when I interviewed him this last weekend, I was like, so how many devices do you have on? He's
0.
like, none.
Yeah.
Right. Because he just got so stuck on it. I think that's an interesting perspective. And some of that comes from, I think what you're talking about is like, he's gotten to this understanding of his own bio-individuality and doesn't need to be trapped by them. Yeah. Renee, anything else to add?
Yeah, 2 things. Well, first of all, with the data tracking, it's really interesting. Lauren and I are very different in how we approach our like Oura Ring data, for example. And we were just together at the Hack Your Health event. We stayed at the same condo all weekend. I checked my Oura every morning. she didn't check it for the whole time she was there. She'd have checked it her final day. And I think it's interesting how different that is. Like for me, even if it's going to be a bad score, quote unquote bad score, I want to know, because I actually am going to change my day a little bit. Maybe I'm going to cut back on the caffeine. Maybe I'm going to sneak in a meditation. Or if it's a really great score, I'm like, okay, I can push it a little bit more today. So I like to have that. But with data, I think know yourself. If the data is going to stress you out, maybe you take a little break. Maybe you turn into Jean where you don't ever track any data. Or if it is really empowering and helping you, then lean into that. So that's my first takeaway is like, what do you need to do?
All right, so Lauren, you just mentioned continuous glucose monitor, and I actually wrote it as GCM, which I don't even have dyslexia, so I don't even know what's going on there. But
you're not alone.
Is there? I haven't done a continuous glucose monitor yet. I just haven't gotten around to it. Like I'm about to purchase it, and it doesn't happen, and whatever. I don't know exactly why, but I'm looking forward to it. What are some things that surprised you with a continuous glucose monitor?
With me personally, or in
or in general, like overall, both.
Yeah, I feel like the big surprise or the big takeaway for everyone is that it's not so much about food; it's about our basic organ systems and about our like foundational behaviors. Like people want to come in to figure out like what do they need to eliminate from their diet or what do they need to avoid. Like carbs is an easy one. People want to demonize carbs so quickly. And sure, maybe for a lot of people, because standard American diet has far too many carbs. And I just had a client ask me like, what's the difference between low carb and ketogenic? I was like, well, for most people eating a standard American diet, like going low carb is a big change, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole other rabbit hole. But I would say the CGM, I almost said GCM. And I do have clients that say that, so sometimes I mess it up too. It's okay. It has all the components. It's a glucose continuous monitor in any order. But I think it really does show our relationship to stress. So we understand our nervous system has a gas and a brake. It's the sympathetic, parasympathetic. And most of us are living in that chronic stress, fight or flight, sympathetically driven. And when we are in fight or flight, our body is going to do everything it can to mobilize resources so that you can run away from the predator. And so what we see on glucose monitors is that a lot of people are living in a stress state. And, you know, there's a lot of offshoots of that, like poor digestion, dehydration, bad sleep. But we're going to see elevated glucose if you are stressed, like bottom line. So a lot of the times the takeaway is like, let's make sure you can be in a better nervous system state and that you're resting and that you're aligning yourself with circadian rhythms and the sun. And then we can kind of nitpick with the food and the macros if that's what you need to really fine tune. So I've seen that for myself. Like some of my biggest spikes have been when I'm stressed and running late, like running to the subway in New York or just like emotionally really kind of taxed. So that's like number one is like, can you get out of a fight or flight sympathetic state and like breathe a little bit? And then we are going to have a better chance of balancing our glucose.
I remember the first time, and I think it was my brother mentioned that you can get an blood sugar spike and then therefore insulin spike from actually hard training. And in my mind, training was how you burned off sugar. It wasn't a possibility, and that was obviously wrong. Renee, have you played around with a CGM?
Yes.
and what have you noticed?
Yes. And Chris, you need to get your hands on one because it's a total game changer when you see this real life data. For me, the biggest takeaway was the importance of sleep. So similar to what Lauren was saying, right, the stress and whether that stress is coming from a high intensity interval training or maybe even a sauna session. But when I don't get enough good quality sleep, the next day my blood sugar is on this roller coaster and I'm like, I'm wanting more carbs, I'm wanting that quick energy, and I just can't get off the ride. And when I get a really good night's sleep, it's like, oh, I can tolerate more carbs. I can have a little sweet something, and it's much more steady. So I have to prioritize my sleep for every aspect of health, but especially for blood sugar.
Mm-hmm. That really makes sense because, right, you get this context of like, I didn't get enough sleep, so you're a little irritable. In the middle of the pandemic, I did a kind of a PR tour with a friend of mine. His name's Patrick Wanis. I interviewed him for the Longevity Summit. He's a human behavior expert. And our goal was to just get on different radio shows and share how people could get better sleep. because in the middle of the pandemic, I mean, this is life in general, but pandemics seem to be especially exacerbate this situation where, you're not getting enough sleep, right? Because you're ruminating about, am I going to get the virus, or like, when are the kids going to get out of this damn house? That was maybe just me, or like all of these things that you're ruminating over. Then you're not getting good sleep, and then you wake up and you're not actually able to handle your emotions as well, right? And that's probably directly related to these blood sugar spikes that you're talking about. And then we talked about this horrible emotional sleep spiral where, okay, now you have bad interactions with people, and now you go to bed and ruminate about those bad reactions with people, and then you wake up and you go through this continuously. Yeah. So, okay. So that's why I in almost every conversation I ever have these days, I get homework, and the minimum at this point is I need to get a continuous glucose monitor or a GCM, whatever's whatever's cheap. I don't know.
Just roll the dice.
So you guys both see clients, and I think that's an advantage a lot of people that I interview have over me, right? So I'm collecting information, I can share information, but I don't get these hands-on opportunities with a lot of different people, right? So I can do my own analysis and think about myself. I want you guys kind of individually describe the results of some work that you've done with clients that you're maybe most proud of, most proud of. And we'll start with Renee this time. We've been starting with Lauren the whole time.
I know, my big sister always gets to go first, so my turn. Yeah, I've seen a really wide range of clients over the years because I've worked at different medical practices. I worked at our dad's practice, wellness centers and things, but one story that always really stands out to me that I want to share is I had this client that had IBS. She's had it her whole life, and she would be in the bathroom like 15 to 20 times a day. And she created this life around that where she knew, where the public restrooms were. She knew she had to go from her house. She had this much time to get to the office. She had to stay at the office. She could never travel, go on vacation, because that would be way too much on her body. And through diet and lifestyle, we were able to rein that in. And after working together for 4 months, she then took her trip of a lifetime, and she went to Ireland for 2 weeks. And it was like the most amazing trip. She came back, she showed me pictures, and like that was so heartwarming to me, like to be able to be a part of someone's life like that. And that's just one story, but there's so many people like that you don't realize their poor health has completely taken over their life. They're not even living anymore because they're so focused on whatever debilitating issue they're dealing with. And I love the quote, without our health, we have nothing. I think that's so true. And then we have 99 problems unless we're sick. And then we have one problem. It's amazing when you're not well, it takes over. So that's just one story, but there's endless. And I think there's just so much opportunity to help people get healthy and start living their lives again.
It is one of the joys that I get in what I do, because we get these just amazing testimonials, and I've gotten testimonials with people. This is one lady who almost cried once because of the change that's been made in her life, and now her significant other is able to know her again, right? And then, because it was related to insomnia, and then at the end, just her thank you was almost tear-felt. So, Lauren, how about you?
This is like the hardest question. I don't know, because there's so many different reasons that people come to me, but often in my book, like the biggest wins are the ones that don't look like much on paper. It is the stories afterwards of clients just being like, oh my gosh, I have so much more ease and freedom and sovereignty and less stress in my life. I mean, I've had cool things where it's like clients are eating perfectly healthy, they think, and then we implement like fasting feeding strategies and they lose 30 pounds and they're like, I didn't think that was possible. But I feel like the most powerful probably has come out of my work with plant medicine, and some of those are strictly plant medicine experiences, but some are infused into the health coaching process where weight loss or sleep was the goal in the journey. And the plant medicine really allowed them to think about their behaviors and their mindset in a different way. So they access like different parts of their brain so they could make new choices. And there's just something so powerful about its effect on the nervous system where I guess one client that's coming to mind, because I have to choose one, was really nitpicking like all of the numbers, like all of the metrics in her life, like how many calories she was burning, how many carbohydrates she was eating, how many minutes of sleep. And after going through plant medicine work, suddenly it was like, oh, the numbers didn't matter. Like she finally could just relax and listen to her body. And like that kind of sovereignty where you don't have to control and micromanage everything in your life is just the greatest gift, I think, to our health. Because at the end of the day, like we are our own intelligence. Our body knows best, and our body has its own natural healing abilities. And if we can trust and kind of like let go, we still have to make good choices and choose good inputs through our food, exercise, and sleep. But I think some people that are just so deep down the rabbit hole of health and tracking, it creates a resistance in a lot of ways. So I would say like all of my plant medicine work has been pretty freaking awesome.
Profound, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's pretty. Yeah. Now, this might be a little more challenging. Was there a particular client that was challenging in the things that you thought might work, didn't work, and you know maybe that's the lesson there? Like this didn't work and it should have, and then maybe you actually overcame it. Like anything in that arena?
All the time. Yeah. It happens all the time because we're all so bio-individual, and so this is really the challenge for a health practitioner is getting to know the other bio-individual because we only know ourselves. So the toolbox has to constantly expand. And so, yeah, sometimes we think one thing's going to work and it doesn't, but it's not a dead end. It's like, oh, okay, well, there's a million other things that we have to kind of check off the list. And I think it's really just a process of like starting with the basics. And then if that doesn't work, we peel back another layer. If that doesn't work, peel back another layer. And one of the biggest things that's really coming up in a lot of my coaching now is just this level of toxicity that we're not aware of, that we really have to address. It's not just about eating right and exercising right anymore. It's so much deeper than that because of the modern, like, stressful, toxic world we live in. But yeah. I believe there's always an answer. I think Renee believes that too. It's sometimes we just have to spend more time with the person.
Yeah.
Well, and I think just to add, like, you know, your first thought, and Renee said this earlier, like, well, Dave Asprey says this, so I'm going to do that. And then, whoa, like, that's almost a great example. But do you have something more closer to home?
Yeah, I think just as a practitioner, being willing to sometimes send a client to another practitioner. Accepting that I don't know everything and I can't help everyone. And I've had some clients where I think it's more the mental status of what's happening up here. Like, I can think of one client where she came to me, she was like, I can only eat 3 foods, I react to everything, and just was very negative and very determined and like, this is me, I can't eat anything, I can't take any supplements. And it's like everything I would recommend, I can't do that. And I had to send her on her way to someone that I thought could maybe tap into more of the emotional and mental part of things. It wasn't about the food anymore.
Yeah, no.
It was the mental piece. And that's just not my specialty. So I was like, I think it's time for you to see someone that can really help you with where you are today.
All right. In my recent longevity summit, I interviewed 2 women to discuss menopause. I did not have any women to discuss wellness and really longevity from the point of, from the perspective of women who still have their cycle. I certainly should have had you guys, obviously, on that summit. What adjustments do you think people need to incorporate and think about regarding longevity for women who still have their cycle?
I think first is you just have to understand hormones. You have to understand like the natural cycle across an average 28-day cycle. Like, what is estrogen doing? What is testosterone doing? What is progesterone doing? So we can understand how we can manipulate food, sleep, exercise to really harness the benefits of all these hormones. I said earlier, like, our bodies are adaptation machines. They want to adapt. They want to change. They don't want to be the same every day. And a lot of women, I think, because we're overwhelmed, this is not just for women, but there's just like this added layer for women because of the cycle, because we're different every day. We get overwhelmed, and when we find something that works, we want to stick to it. And that actually, there are some benefits there, but then there's some disadvantages because our body doesn't want us to do the same thing every day. So once we have that education of what the hormones are naturally doing, and then there's a process of like knowing our body, because not everyone has a 28-day cycle. Some people are irregular, some people ovulate on a different day. We have to do that kind of tracking and listening. And then once we do that, we can harness with food and exercise so that we are constantly forcing the body to adapt. We're resting when our body really wants it. We're pushing when our body can handle it. And it's difficult. Like, it can take months before a female really harnesses the benefits of the cycle syncing. But there's just so much in there. And I think we can flip flop from like overtraining and really destroying our hormones to doing not enough. You know, being sedentary is a problem, but overtraining is a problem too. So it's really, again, meeting the individual and then just starting with that education around hormones often like really creates a lot of change just there.
Maybe you need a CHM, continuous hormone monitor.
Yeah, continuous hormone monitor. I love it. Also known as the Aura Ring is like a great way to monitor your fluctuations because we can see changes in HRV, that's our heart rate variability, body temperature, and even resting heart rate changes across the month. So even if you don't know on each particular day, we get like at least first half of the cycle, second half of the cycle, we can make some basic changes there.
It wouldn't surprise me that they come out with some indicator, right? Because I know I was working with a consultant for Aura Ring pre-pandemic, and because our most consistent testimonial is better sleep, and so I wanted to like put together this project, and then it turns out the Aura Ring's pretty good at identifying COVID, and so that consultant disappeared right in the middle of COVID. Still need to reach out to him, but it wouldn't surprise. At some point, it'll say, "Hey, you might be aware, you might be coming down with something," right? Because it notices your temperature go up. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's actually tracking your guys' cycle already, and they're just honing the data or something. I mean, that would be
the algorithms are getting better and better. It's funny that you mentioned COVID because I was part of like one of the first study groups with the Aura Ring where they sent me a COVID test, and there was a protocol. It was like, we will tell you when to test for COVID because we are predicting that we will know before you know.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm not feeling good. And I'm like waiting for the communication. And I'm like, days later, I'm still not feeling good. Then I tested. I was like, I'm definitely positive for COVID. So I reached out to Aura and I was like, hey, I have COVID. And they were like, well, our metrics don't say that, so we still don't want you to test. I was like, okay.
Oh,
but that was early on.
That.
I think the data has changed, but that's like the beauty of technology. It's like not perfect in the beginning, but
I had the complete different experience. My husband and I, we detected COVID with our Aura rings, and Aura actually interviewed us. Chris, I'll send you the article. We were like one of the first.
That was really cool.
Yeah. Because it was like they weren't even talking about COVID at the time, but my Aura ring was like, all the things are changing. And I was like, weird. And then 24 hours later, I started feeling sick. And it was also really helpful to see all of the stats while we had COVID. So we knew like when to keep resting, when to push it or whatever. So I'll send you the article, Chris. It was pretty cool.
That was pretty. And Renee, did you have anything to add, kind of related to what women who still have their cycle should be focusing on in terms of longevity? And then we'll get into our wrap up questions because I want to be mindful of the time.
Yeah, I think just reinforcing what Lauren said is really get to know your cycle, learn the hormones. It's sadly we had like one day in 5th grade where we were taught like, oh, you're going to get your period and you can get pregnant any day of the month. End of story. That's like all we learned. And there are women in their 30s and 40s that still like never really learned. And so using something like an Aura ring, I really like the Natural Cycles app to really tune in and learn. And then it also gives us grace as women to see this. Like I see a lot of women kind of punish themselves the last week of their cycle. Like, oh, I'm tired. I don't want to go to the gym. I just want to eat ice cream. It's like, hey, that's actually okay. This is a good time to go for a walk, to meditate, to focus on your sleep optimization because sleep quality does decline as progesterone declines. And so I think it just gives us this like empowerment to say, this is what's supposed to be happening in my body. I'm just going to lean into it and then I'll feel even better.
Yeah, you're not lazy. You don't suck. You're just supposed to go into hibernation a little bit.
Yeah. And if you don't, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it.
Yeah.
And I think Lauren made the point, like this is pretty, like, because we're talking about a 20-day, 28, 30-day cycle. So to really get the data, right, to try and get the data and then really equate that data to exactly how you're feeling from a perspective, okay, maybe you've been having your period for years, but you haven't been actually really focused in on it. Your months, like it takes multiple months to go like, oh, this is day 5 or days, whatever. It's a long time frame and I imagine it's a lot of work. So, I mean, you guys do all sorts of work. So I was listening to your podcast with Brittany and that just highlighted even more the work that you guys do.
Yeah.
It's a lot. All right, here are our wrap-up questions, slightly rapid fire. We'll start with the youngest. Do you have a target age that you want to live to, Renee?
Oh, this question. I want to say 100. But again, I think a lot of us in the space really focus on health span. To be honest, if it's 80 or 90, that's when my health span is going to end. I'm okay checking out. But if I could live to 120 or 150 and still, be going to the gym and be going to the bathroom by myself and feeding myself, then hey, bring it on. But I really want it to be an optimal life with whatever age it is. So really, I would say 80 to 150 is my range. I want to be traveling the world. I have a lot to see. I don't want to just be in some retirement bed for the last 20, 30 years of my life. No, thank you.
Lauren, how about you? What's the target age that you want to live to?
I mean, I'm very similar to Renee, but I think 100 would feel really cool. My competitive perfectionist tendencies would say 100 would be awesome. Our great aunt is turning 100 this year, which is really cool. And we're going to do a genetic test on her because we're like, what? How is she doing this? She's on no medications. It's amazing. But yeah, same thing. If I'm being an a-hole and I'm uncomfortable in my body, hopefully I could just go peacefully, sooner than later. I don't want to be miserable, and I certainly don't want to make the people around me miserable. So it's more about quality, I think, than the actual number. But 100 would be cool.
100. How long do you think humans can live?
I don't know. This David Sinclair theory that aging is actually not a thing.
Curable.
It's curable. I don't know. I mean, if we look at the blue zones, we know it's possible to live to 120, so, but there's just so much in our environment that is against us and out of our control. I think we are starting to control more and more, but I think first and foremost, if we don't get a handle on our food supply and also our relationship to stress, we're just going to keep going down. But I think it's possible. I don't agree with Dave Asprey. It's 150, 180. I don't know about that. I'm going to say
120?
120, 130 seems achievable.
130. All right. We'll take the bigger number because you're competitive. All right, Renee?
I think today I would say 120, but I think in 10 years from now, maybe 140. In another 10 years, maybe 170. I agree. It's interesting. Our planet is getting more toxic at an exponential rate, but the science on longevity is also becoming exponential. So it'll be interesting to see in 10, 20 years where we are. I mean, if I can just, inject a stem cell and regrow my liver, regrow my knee, maybe grow some
more
new
tequila.
teeth. Yeah. I think there is potential. There is potential. But at the same time, we're also seeing fertility rates drop. So, of course, there's the ethical question. If we all start living to 200, are we going to have too many people? But that's also by 2050, we're all going to be infertile. So it's an interesting thing to think about.
Maybe it's not a problem. I love, and just real quick to interject, in 1950, medical information doubled every 50 years. Today, it doubles every 73 days. That means at the end of this year, we're going to have 16 times more medical information than we had at the beginning of this year.
Wow.
That's wild.
It's crazy. And in reality, it doesn't include AI yet. Right? Because that's today's number, right? AI is still just getting incorporated into so many things. So it really, I think if it can happen, it's going to happen a lot faster. All right, let's stay on track. We'll stay with you, Renee. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets? Let's call them shortcuts to longevity, because everybody likes shortcuts, to longevity and a long health span that you would share.
Number 1, sleep optimization. Whatever you need to do to optimize your sleep. We spend a third of our lives sleeping. For me, something like the 8 sleep has been a total game changer. So I think find what is the game changer for you to optimize your sleep. Happiness, laughter. I think that's so important. Community, right? This is not a biohacking tech, especially in the blue zones we see. They're all in community. They're all having great conversations. They're happy. They have purpose. They're laughing. I think that's such an important piece. And third, I would say use the latest science. I really like something like Hotbox that has all these anti-aging ingredients in a packet that's easy to take. If you can afford exosomes, I think that's a really great hack for longevity, and something that probably starting at my 50th birthday, maybe I'll do every 6 months or something. But I'm 37 now, so I'm not going to spend the money quite yet.
All right, so I got sleep, I've got mindset, really happiness and laughter, and I put separate community because I think those can be separate, and then just the science, like digging into the science. I love what Tom O'Brien says, is that you should spend, and this is not us because we're biohackers, but you should spend 1 hour per week educating yourself on the science and what's out there as an opportunity. Lauren, 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, shortcuts.
More sunshine or more outdoor light. For my energy, my mood, and my sleep, like sunshine is always the number one. Everything gets better. There's like not a sleep supplement that can outpower the sunshine. And we're spending far too much time indoors, which comes with all this other crap, like indoor pollution and shitty lights and lack of nature and bugs and stuff. So like get outside. A little bit along the lines of Renee, what she said about happiness and joy. Our friends, Ben Azadi talks about vitamin G, gratitude. And our friend Freddie Kimmel talks about vitamin J for joy. So like more joy, more gratitude. And my third one, probably just one I'm talking about the most with clients, is like feasting, fasting strategies. Like figure out a way to get some downtime from eating in your diet. And that's so bio-individual, but I think ancestrally we were meant to feast and we were meant to fast. We're not meant to eat the same way every single day. And there's so much healing power that we can get from flipping between those two strategies.
Excellent. All right, we'll stay with you, Lauren. 1 to 2 things people are getting absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span.
Oh, well, along the same lines, I think a lot of people are intermittent fasting and just eating in the same windows like every single day. So you're not forcing your body to adapt. That's one. I'm going to stick with it. The indoors, we're spending far too much time indoors under dirty pollution and too much blue light. And blue light's not bad. We get blue light from the sun, but we're getting too much artificial blue light. And lastly, I don't know. I have 2, but I could just go across the board. It's like we're not communing enough, and that's like that's probably my edge, is that I enjoy work. I like time alone, but I think that for our health, we have to be eating with family and friends. We have to be socializing. We have to be taking time off of work. We have to be going on vacation. That's a tough one, but like it really matters.
Excellent. And Renee? 1 to 2 things people are absolutely getting wrong regarding longevity and a long health span.
Ignoring emotional trauma, not exploring that.
Ooh, good one.
Yeah, I think people are harboring things, and I think truly when you don't speak up about something and maybe you feel like you're not being seen or heard in life, that is being stored in the body, and I think it is showing up as disease and health issues. So whatever you want to do, whether it is microdosing or macrodosing or finding a good therapist, just really, really looking at emotional trauma. And that can be like the smallest little trauma of something that happened in kindergarten, I don't know, all the way to massive trauma. So trauma, I also think giving up meat. A lot of people are giving up meat because they think it's bad for the planet, it's bad for our bodies. But again, circling back to that documentary I was mentioning, like we evolved because we ate meat. So I think it has a really important place in our diet. And I'm not saying go eat like conventionally raised crap meat. Don't do that. But regenerative farming and really being conscious of that.
Makes sense. Whoever wants to answer, how can people contact you guys?
So we have our podcast, The Biohacker Babes, comes out every Monday. So you can find that on our website, thebiohackerbabes.com. We're also the biohacker_babes on Instagram. I'm sure if you start typing those letters, it'll hopefully pop up. But we spend a lot of time on Instagram. It's a good way to message us and connect. And happy to share our email, biohackerbabes@gmail.com.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And then what in the near future are you guys either collectively or individually excited about?
Well, I feel like we just wrapped up a big spring full of events, but I'm always looking forward to the next event. We have Health Span Summit coming up in the fall, A4M, the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine here in Vegas. I love those because I learn, we're back in community, and I guess personally just going to Switzerland and Greece to explore some new cultures and just relax and enjoy it.
Anything to add, Lauren?
We've been working on a course, a women's health course. It's taking longer than we thought, but it is on the horizon coming. And it's what we try to do with our podcast. Again, it's just empowering people to learn how to biohack so they know what is working for them and to reduce the overwhelm. So we're really going to talk through all these strategies of really creating your bio-individual blueprint. So that's coming soon.
Excellent. So you can reach Lauren and Renee at biohackerbabes.com. That's a link to their podcast. Biohacker_babes is on Instagram. And then the email is biohackerbabes@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. You're a wonderful host. So fun.
Thanks for having us.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.